Welcome to Brain Upgrade. Before we begin, I want you to ask yourself one simple question. What if the harder you're forcing life, the further you're moving away from the life you're actually meant to live? Most people believe success comes from controlling everything, every outcome, every relationship, every opportunity. But neuroscience tells us something different. And if you combine that understanding with faith, you discover a powerful truth. Your job is to prepare, God's job is to guide. Today, we're going to explore why letting go isn't weakness, why patience changes your brain, and why the doors that remain closed are sometimes protecting the future you're praying for. Stay with me until the end, because one idea in this video could completely change the way you look at your life. Let's begin. Every person has experienced a moment where they wanted something so badly that it became the only thing they could think about. A relationship, a career opportunity, financial success, recognition. The harder they chased it, the more distant it seemed to become. That pattern is not simply emotional. It reflects how the brain behaves under chronic pressure. When the mind becomes attached to one specific outcome, it narrows its field of attention. Instead of seeing possibilities, it begins filtering reality through a single expectation. Everything that doesn't match that expectation feels like failure, even when it may actually be moving you towards something better. Your nervous system is designed to help you survive uncertainty, but when uncertainty becomes mixed with obsession, the brain shifts into a heightened state of vigilance. Stress hormones remain elevated, attention becomes rigid, and decision-making loses flexibility. You stop responding intelligently to reality and start reacting emotionally to imagined futures. That is where forcing begins. It isn't just pushing harder. It is resisting what is actually happening in favor of what you wish would happen immediately. One of the most overlooked principles of human performance is that clarity rarely appears when the mind is desperate. Clarity emerges when the nervous system is stable enough to observe without distortion. Think about the times you have made your best decisions. They probably didn't happen in moments of panic. They happened when you were calm enough to notice details that had always been there. The opportunity wasn't necessarily new. Your ability to perceive it was. This is where faith becomes deeply practical. Faith is not the absence of action. It is the absence of unnecessary resistance. It allows your brain to stay engaged without becoming consumed by the need to control every variable. When you trust that not every delay is a denial, your physiology changes. You breathe differently. You think differently. Your attention broadens. You become capable of recognizing information that anxiety would have hidden from you. There is a powerful distinction between effort and force. Effort is intentional. It is consistent. It is directed toward behaviors that you can actually control. Force is an attempt to manipulate outcomes that exist beyond your control. You can prepare for an interview. You cannot force someone to hire you. You can love another person honestly. You cannot force them to love you back. You can build valuable skills every single day. You cannot force success to arrive on your preferred timeline. The brain performs remarkably well when it has a clear process. It performs poorly when it becomes attached to immediate rewards. This is because your reward systems are heavily influenced by expectation. If you constantly expect instant results, every delay generates disappointment. Over time, disappointment reduces motivation, increases stress, and eventually convinces you that your efforts are meaningless. But if your reward comes from the process itself, from becoming stronger, wiser, more disciplined, your motivation becomes far more resilient. You continue moving because growth itself becomes rewarding. Reality often gives subtle feedback before it gives obvious answers. Small setbacks, unexpected conversations, closed doors, and changing circumstances are constantly providing information. But when you are forcing an outcome, you ignore those signals because they don't fit your desired narrative. You mistake persistence for stubbornness. There is a difference. Persistence means continuing your commitment to your purpose. Stubbornness means refusing to adapt when reality is clearly asking you to change direction. Some of the greatest opportunities in life begin as disappointments. A rejected application creates space for a better career. A broken relationship prevents years of future pain. A delayed opportunity allows skills to develop that would have been impossible under different circumstances. In the moment, the brain labels these experiences as loss because it compares reality to expectation. But with time, the same events often become the foundation of something far greater. This doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you stop working. In fact, it requires extraordinary discipline. You wake up, you prepare your body, you train your mind, you improve your skills, you honor your commitments, you make decisions based on values rather than emotions. Then, after doing everything within your control, you release the need to dictate exactly how life must respond. That release is not weakness, it is confidence. It reflects an understanding that your responsibility is your effort, not absolute control over every outcome. When people force life, they often become exhausted because they are trying to carry a burden that was never theirs to carry. They replay conversations, predict future problems, and invent scenarios that may never happen. Every one of those mental simulations consumes energy. Your brain cannot always distinguish between imagined threats and real ones. As a result, your body responds with genuine physiological stress. Over weeks and months, that pattern becomes draining, leaving less energy for the actions that truly matter. The paradox is that many of the things people desire most arrive when they stop gripping them so tightly. Not because the universe rewards passivity, but because a relaxed, attentive mind performs better than an anxious one. When your nervous system is regulated, your perception expands, your communication improves, your decisions become more precise, you notice opportunities, relationships, and solutions that were invisible when your attention was consumed by fear. Sometimes the strongest move is not to push harder. Sometimes it is to remain steady. Continue your preparation, stay aligned with your values, and allow God's timing to reveal what your own urgency could never see. That combination of disciplined action and quiet trust is where real strength begins. It is not about giving up control because you are powerless. It is about recognizing that wisdom starts where unnecessary control ends. One of the greatest sources of unnecessary suffering is the belief that everything meaningful must happen according to our timeline. We often assume that if something is taking longer than expected, something must be wrong. But the brain naturally prefers certainty over ambiguity. It would rather receive a clear yes or no than sit in the discomfort of not yet. That discomfort is where many people begin forcing decisions, abandoning long-term goals, or losing faith in the very process that is shaping them. From a biological perspective, uncertainty activates neural circuits involved in vigilance. Your brain begins scanning the environment for threats because it interprets the unknown as something potentially dangerous. If you don't understand this mechanism, you can mistake normal uncertainty for evidence that you're failing. In reality, uncertainty is often a sign that your brain is adapting to a new challenge. Growth rarely feels comfortable because it requires your nervous system to reorganize itself around experiences it has never encountered before. Patience, then, is not passive waiting. It is active regulation of your internal state while reality unfolds at its own pace. It is the ability to remain engaged without allowing fear to dominate your thinking. That distinction changes everything. A regulated nervous system can evaluate information objectively. A dysregulated nervous system reacts impulsively, looking for immediate relief instead of long-term progress. Think about learning any complex skill, whether it is building a business, strengthening your body, mastering a profession, or developing emotional resilience. Improvement rarely follows a straight line. Progress occurs through repeated cycles of effort, recovery, adjustment, and refinement. Some days you notice measurable improvement, other days it feels like nothing is changing at all. Yet beneath the surface, your brain is continuously reorganizing neural pathways through repetition. The absence of immediate visible results does not mean the process has stopped. Often the most significant changes occur before you can consciously recognize them. The same principle applies to life itself. There are seasons where nothing seems to move forward. Doors remain closed, opportunities disappear, plans fall apart. The immediate reaction is to believe that time is being wasted. But time spent developing wisdom, discipline, emotional stability, and character is never wasted. Those qualities become the foundation upon which every future opportunity depends. Many people pray for greater responsibility while resisting the preparation required to handle it. They ask for success but become frustrated when life demands patience first. Yet responsibility without preparation often becomes a burden rather than a blessing. There's a reason certain opportunities arrive only after you become capable of sustaining them. Timing is not merely about external events aligning. It is also about internal readiness. When you begin trusting the process instead of obsessing over the timeline, something remarkable happens inside the brain. Your attention shifts away from constant evaluation of outcomes and toward the quality of your daily behaviors. Instead of asking, "Why hasn't this happened yet?" you begin asking, "What can I improve today?" That subtle shift transforms motivation because it places your focus on variables you can actually control. Every meaningful transformation begins with ordinary actions repeated consistently. Your brain adapts to repetition. Your habits become automatic through repetition. Your confidence grows through repetition. None of those processes can be rushed. They depend on time because biological adaptation requires time. Just as a muscle cannot be strengthened overnight, emotional resilience, wisdom, and self-control cannot be compressed into a single breakthrough moment. This is why comparison is so damaging. The moment you compare your timeline to someone else's, your brain creates an artificial sense of urgency. You begin believing you are behind even though you have no access to the full story of another person's struggles, sacrifices, or preparation. Comparison replaces curiosity with anxiety. Instead of learning from others, you compete with an illusion. That constant comparison pulls your attention away from your own development, which is the only place real progress can occur. There is also a profound psychological benefit to accepting that not every delay requires immediate interpretation. Humans naturally create stories to explain uncertainty. If something hasn't happened yet, the mind quickly generates conclusions. I'm not good enough. I've missed my chance. Maybe this isn't meant for me. But these conclusions are usually emotional predictions rather than objective facts. A patient mind resists the urge to create permanent conclusions from temporary circumstances. Faith plays an important role here because it interrupts the brain's tendency to catastrophize. Faith reminds you that limited information should not produce absolute certainty about the future. Just because you cannot currently see the purpose of a delay does not mean one doesn't exist. Many of life's most important lessons become visible only in retrospect. Looking backward, people often recognize that what felt like rejection was actually protection, and what felt like waiting was actually preparation. Trusting God's timing does not remove personal responsibility. On the contrary, it increases it. Instead of demanding immediate answers, you become committed to daily excellence. You continue showing integrity when nobody notices. You continue working even when progress appears invisible. You continue developing skills that may not pay off today but will become invaluable tomorrow. This creates a powerful combination of humility and confidence. Humility because you acknowledge that you cannot control everything. Confidence because you know your daily choices are moving you forward, even when external results remain unseen. The people who endure uncertainty most effectively are rarely the ones with the easiest lives. They are the ones who have trained themselves to separate effort from outcome. They understand that today's actions are investments, not guarantees. Seeds do not become trees overnight. Foundations are laid long before buildings appear. Preparation often happens in silence before success becomes visible. When you stop demanding that life conform to your schedule, you begin experiencing each day differently. Instead of measuring your worth by immediate achievements, you measure it by your consistency, your character, your discipline, and your willingness to keep moving with faith. Ironically, that mindset often accelerates progress because your energy is no longer consumed by frustration. It is invested in growth. Real peace comes when you realize that your timeline is limited by what you can currently see, but God's perspective extends far beyond the present moment. Your responsibility is not to predict every step ahead. Your responsibility is to take the next faithful step with excellence, trusting that every season, even the quiet ones, is shaping you for something your current understanding cannot yet fully comprehend. There is a common misunderstanding about surrender. Many people hear the phrase "let go" and immediately associate it with quitting, lowering standards, or becoming passive. But those ideas have nothing to do with genuine surrender. The highest performing individuals understand something that often goes unnoticed. There is an enormous difference between releasing control over an outcome and reducing the quality of your effort. In fact, the people who accomplish the most are often those who prepare with extraordinary discipline while remaining emotionally unattached to immediate results. The human brain functions best when it can distinguish between what is controllable and what is not. This distinction reduces unnecessary cognitive load. When you spend mental energy trying to manipulate variables outside your influence, you leave fewer resources available for the behaviors that actually determine long-term success. Attention is a limited resource. Every minute spent worrying about outcomes is a minute not invested in preparation. Preparation changes the brain in measurable ways. Every repetition strengthens neural pathways associated with that skill. Every focused practice session improves coordination between different brain regions responsible for attention, decision-making, and performance. These changes don't happen because you wish for them. They happen because consistent behavior teaches the nervous system what matters. The brain adapts to what you repeatedly do, not to what you repeatedly hope. That is why preparation should become your identity rather than your circumstances. If your confidence depends entirely on external success, then your emotional state will constantly fluctuate. One compliment makes you feel capable, one criticism makes you question yourself, one victory creates excitement, one setback creates doubt. But if your confidence comes from knowing you prepared with integrity, your emotional stability becomes much more resilient. You are grounded in something that cannot be taken away by temporary outcomes. Consider how often people confuse urgency with effectiveness. They rush decisions because they fear missing opportunities. They overwork because they believe exhaustion proves commitment. They constantly check for results because silence feels uncomfortable. Yet urgency often narrows perception. When the nervous system operates under chronic pressure, attention becomes fixated on immediate threats instead of long-term strategy. The result is reactive thinking rather than intelligent action. Preparation requires a different mindset. It asks you to slow your thinking while maintaining your effort. It encourages deliberate practice instead of emotional reaction. Every day becomes an opportunity to improve something specific. You refine your communication, you strengthen your discipline, you increase your knowledge, you improve your health. These investments accumulate quietly. They rarely produce instant recognition, but they fundamentally reshape who you become. One of the greatest advantages of preparation is that it reduces fear. Fear often comes from uncertainty about your own readiness. When you know you've done the work, uncertainty loses much of its power. You may not know what the outcome will be, but you know you have become someone capable of handling whatever happens next. That kind of confidence is different from arrogance. Arrogance assumes success is guaranteed. Genuine confidence simply trusts your preparation. This principle becomes especially important during disappointment. Most people experience setbacks and immediately interpret them as personal failures, but setbacks are often sources of information rather than evidence of inadequacy. If you approach them with curiosity instead of emotion, they become teachers. Every rejection reveals something. Every mistake provides feedback. Every unexpected obstacle exposes a weakness that can now be strengthened. The challenge is that the brain naturally resists feedback because it threatens the self-image. It is easier to blame circumstances than to evaluate your own process objectively. Yet growth depends on accurate feedback, not punishment, not self-criticism, just honest observation. What worked, what didn't, what can improve? Those questions create adaptation. Blame creates stagnation. At the same time, there comes a moment when preparation is complete and control must end. This is where many people struggle. They continue replaying possibilities in their minds long after they have done everything they reasonably could. They rehearse conversations that have already ended. They imagine outcomes they cannot influence. They mentally revisit decisions that can no longer be changed. This constant mental rehearsal creates the illusion of productivity, but it produces only fatigue. Your mind was designed to solve problems, not endlessly simulate them. Once action has been taken, excessive rumination serves no useful biological purpose. It simply keeps the stress response active. Learning to recognize this pattern is incredibly important because many people mistake overthinking for responsibility. They believe that if they worry enough, they are somehow protecting themselves from disappointment. In reality, they are only prolonging their own stress. Releasing control after preparation is an act of wisdom. It acknowledges that some variables belong to you while others never did. You control your habits, you control your effort, you control your integrity, you control your willingness to learn. You do not control every opportunity, every opinion, every delay, or every outcome. Accepting this reality frees enormous amounts of mental energy. Faith strengthens this process because it reminds you that your responsibility ends where your control ends. You prepare as though your effort matters deeply because it does. Then you trust that the results will unfold according to a wisdom greater than your immediate understanding. This perspective does not reduce ambition, it purifies it. Instead of chasing success out of fear, you pursue excellence out of purpose. Ironically, people who hold outcomes too tightly often perform below their actual ability. Anxiety interferes with memory, attention, creativity, and decision-making. Their preparation becomes overshadowed by pressure, but when the mind remains calm, the skills developed through repetition emerge naturally. Performance becomes more fluid because attention stays in the present rather than racing into imagined futures. Every meaningful achievement is built twice. First, through disciplined preparation that nobody sees. Second, through opportunities that reveal what preparation has already created. The visible moment is brief. The invisible work is what makes it possible. There is great freedom in knowing that your value is not determined by whether every plan unfolds exactly as expected. Your value is reflected in the person you become while preparing. Every day you choose discipline over distraction, integrity over shortcuts, patience over panic, and faith over fear. You are becoming stronger in ways that no setback can erase. Once you understand that, preparation stops feeling like a waiting room for success. It becomes success itself because it transforms you into someone who is ready for whatever God places in your path. There comes a point in every person's life when effort alone can no longer answer every question. You can study harder, plan more carefully, wake up earlier, improve your habits, and still find yourself standing in front of a door that refuses to open. The instinct is often to push harder, to assume that if you simply increase your effort, the outcome will eventually change. But life doesn't always respond to force. Sometimes it responds to alignment. There is a profound difference between trying to control every direction your life takes and becoming attentive enough to recognize where you are being guided. The human brain is remarkable at detecting patterns. Every day it processes an extraordinary amount of sensory information, filtering what deserves your attention and ignoring what it considers irrelevant. This filtering process is influenced by your beliefs, expectations, and emotional state. If your mind is dominated by fear and urgency, it primarily notices obstacles, threats, and reasons to worry. But when your nervous system is calm and grounded, your attention expands. You begin recognizing opportunities, meaningful conversations, unexpected solutions, and moments of clarity that were always present but previously hidden beneath mental noise. That is one reason inner stillness matters so much. Stillness is not inactivity. It is the absence of unnecessary mental interference. When the mind becomes quieter, judgment improves. Decisions become less reactive and more intentional. Instead of responding to every emotion as though it were an emergency, you begin observing your thoughts without immediately acting on them. This creates space between impulse and action, and that space is where wisdom often appears. Many people assume guidance arrives as a dramatic moment that changes everything instantly. More often, it comes through small adjustments that seem almost insignificant at first. A conversation you nearly skipped, a book you felt compelled to read, a delay that redirected your plans, a closed door that eventually led you toward a better opportunity. Looking back, those moments often appear connected, but while living through them, they rarely seem extraordinary. Guidance is often subtle because growth requires awareness more than spectacle. This is why daily habits become so important. Every consistent habit shapes the quality of your attention. Sleep influences emotional regulation. Exercise improves cognitive flexibility. Reflection strengthens self-awareness. Gratitude shifts perception toward abundance rather than scarcity. Moments of prayer quiet the constant demand for certainty and replace it with trust. These practices are not separate from spiritual growth. They create the internal environment where wisdom becomes easier to recognize. One of the greatest obstacles to recognizing direction is constant distraction. Modern life trains the brain to seek continuous stimulation. Notifications, endless scrolling, constant comparison, and perpetual busyness leave very little room for deep reflection. When attention becomes fragmented, discernment becomes difficult. You may hear countless opinions while losing connection with your own values. The louder the external world becomes, the harder it is to notice the quiet convictions that often point you toward the right path. There is also an important distinction between fear and intuition. Fear usually demands immediate action. It creates urgency, tension, and catastrophic thinking. It tells you that every decision must be made now or everything will fall apart. Genuine wisdom feels different. It is steady rather than frantic. It encourages careful observation instead of impulsive reaction. It doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it provides enough clarity to take the next step faithfully without needing to see the entire journey. This perspective changes how you interpret setbacks. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this experience teaching me?" That question immediately transforms your relationship with adversity. Challenges stop becoming proof that you have been abandoned. They become opportunities to develop patience, humility, resilience, and wisdom. Every obstacle becomes part of your education rather than evidence of your failure. There is tremendous strength in accepting that you do not need every answer today. The brain naturally seeks completion because unresolved situations create psychological tension. But maturity involves becoming comfortable with incomplete information. You move forward based on principles rather than perfect certainty. You remain faithful to your responsibilities while allowing the future to unfold one step at a time. Faith and action are not opposites. They reinforce one another. Faith without action becomes wishful thinking. Action without faith often becomes exhausting because it depends entirely on your limited ability to control circumstances. Together, they create balance. You work diligently because your responsibilities matter. You remain peaceful because you understand that outcomes are influenced by factors beyond your own effort. Another powerful shift occurs when your identity becomes rooted in purpose instead of achievement. Achievements come and go. Success rises and falls. Public recognition changes quickly, but purpose provides stability regardless of external circumstances. A person driven only by achievement becomes anxious whenever progress slows. A person guided by purpose continues moving because their motivation extends beyond temporary rewards. This mindset also transforms relationships. Instead of trying to manipulate people into meeting your expectations, you approach them with greater patience and understanding. You stop forcing conversations that no longer bring peace. You stop chasing validation from people who cannot provide it. You recognize that not every relationship is meant to continue forever, and not every goodbye is a punishment. Sometimes release creates the space necessary for healthier connections to enter your life. One of the greatest indicators that you are moving in the right direction is not the complete absence of difficulty. Challenges will always exist. The difference is that your internal response changes. You become less reactive, less fearful, and less desperate to control every detail. Confidence grows because it is no longer dependent upon perfect circumstances. It is built upon trust, consistency, and the quiet assurance that every faithful step has value even when its destination remains invisible. Life often makes more sense looking backward than looking forward. Events that once appeared random begin revealing a deeper pattern. Delays protected you from paths that were never meant for you. Unexpected changes developed strengths you would never have chosen voluntarily. Closed doors redirected your attention toward opportunities that ultimately align more closely with your purpose.
When you stop demanding certainty before taking action, you discover something remarkable. Peace does not come from knowing exactly what tomorrow will bring. Peace comes from knowing that you can walk into tomorrow with integrity, discipline, humility, and trust. You continue doing what is right, improving what you can improve, serving where you are able, and allowing God's wisdom to illuminate each next step at the right moment. In that posture, your life becomes less about controlling every outcome and more about faithfully becoming the person you were created to be.
If this message changed the way you think, don't let it stay as inspiration. Turn it into action. Today, stop forcing what you cannot control. Focus on becoming the person you're meant to be, and trust that every step taken with discipline and faith is moving you exactly where you need to go. Remember, peace doesn't come from controlling the future. It comes from trusting God while giving your absolute best today. Thanks for watching. If you found value in this video, make sure to like, subscribe to Brain Upgrade, and share it with someone who needs this message today. Until next time, keep upgrading your mind, strengthening your discipline, and letting God guide your path.